Thank you for coming out to join our session on our Blueprint for Justice. And our last segment, Angela said something that really struck me and has struck me since I first heard her say it. And one of the things that she said, that her son did not get killed physically, but he got killed emotionally and spiritually. And one of the things that Angela and I had talked about is that he was not the same after that encounter with the police. And I have my friend, my sister, who has been a champion for the African American to ensure that we have the mental health, healthy mental health that we need to be successful in our society, even dealing with the loss of our loved ones. And so I want to give Gigi the space. I want to thank you for joining us today. I thank you. I watch you many, many times going to the court systems for families who have their loved ones incarcerated, for families who children are suffering mental challenges, for myself, for mothers who have lost children. And I've watched you work to ensure that Oscar's name is not forgotten. Miles Hall's name is not forgotten. Abeletto, his name is not forgotten. I've watched you so many years champion for families. And so I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I'm Gigi Crowder, and I'm best known, I guess, as the Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Contra Costa County. But in working in the mental health field, I quickly discovered that the individuals who are most harmed, incarcerated when living with what is a medical condition, mental illness, was African American. Having grown up around the corner from the Black Panther Party, something was birthed in me about being empowered and understanding how important we are as kings and queens. So to sit in a setting that was set up with a Western approach to supporting individuals, I recognized right away from a public health standpoint, if you start working with the community most harmed, all will benefit. So I think God directed me in the area of making sure that people understood that Black minds matter too. And so I appreciate you all for wearing the green and black ribbons, because that was also after doing a statewide project to reduce stigma around mental health. When the funds were finally available, there wasn't any left for us. And the answer was, we're looking at the language barriers. But obviously there is a language barrier when African Americans are saying what they need and they have trouble hearing us. So I wanted to make sure that I understood the trauma that we experienced. Growing up in Oakland, we were all traumatized when we heard of the untimely, brutal death of Oscar Grant. We all had to grapple with our own emotions and feelings about how could a young man coming back from a New Year's Eve celebration end up, and he's handcuffed, end up being shot by law enforcement. And we all saw the video, and there wasn't the immediate arrest of the officers. We couldn't understand that. So we had to protect ourselves. And some of us protected ourselves by pretending it didn't happen, which is never healthy. Because when you do that, you internalize it, right? And then you might self-medicate because you're trying to remove the feelings that you have about something. But some of us decided we wanted to stand with his loving, beautiful mom and fight for justice. But we didn't have the tools to do it. We didn't know how to do it. It was the first time that I'm aware of that a community of people came together. That was the healthy part of ourselves, saying, Don't self-medicate. Don't internalize the rage. Come out and fight. So for any of you all, and I've met many of you before, I've shared with you, we got to keep the names alive. Every time you say your loving child's name who was killed, you breathe new life into yourself and into their memory. And so getting the tips we need to address post-traumatic stress disorder, understanding that even in the military, why would an individual struggle so much with a mental illness? Because that's what it is. It's a very severe mental illness. So anytime there's conflict, you're not going to be at peace with yourself. You're going to be in a disarray. So when we start thinking about all the emotional toil that we have to carry with us when we can't trust people who have taken an oath and decided they're going to protect you and serve you, but they're not given the tools to do it, because the history of policing, we all know, is from the fact that we were enslaved and they had to have a model in which to go back and capture us. So that racism, the systemic racism, was birthed into policing. It's so systemic. It's done by design because it doesn't feel good to just arrest us now physically, so we would all be in jail. No, you try and arrest our development spiritually at a very young age. That's why I'm so blessed to have Reverend Wanda Johnson on the NAMI staff. She's going to be leading our older adult services because we got to find a way to keep her connected. Because guess what? All of you who have a loved one who live with mental illness, you are live with mental illness or who was killed by law enforcement. You are the experts of knowing how to support someone else who's had that.
So I'm listening to what you're saying, and I think about the internal trauma, and my mind is reflecting back to the 1800s.
Yes.
My mind is reflecting back when policing started, and I think about our people being enslaved and that internal trauma that they faced then. I even think about in the 60s in Birmingham, in Alabama, when some of our people was marching and they were whipped and they were bitten by dogs and they were hit with billy clubs. And then I think about the generation today seeing and internalizing all of those things, and the parents here who have lost their children, internalizing the trauma of receiving the phone call, hearing the trauma of a sound of the 4th of July or gunshots going off, dealing with that trauma. What are some of the tools that you can share with us here to help us be able to cope and to, I don't want to say go forward, because you still are stuck in a time, but still having to know that time is still going. What are some of the tools that you could give us that we could carry with us?
Yeah, so for anyone who's experienced any kind of trauma, and we all have, any kind of trauma at all, first you have to learn how to protect yourself through self-care and have to understand that no is a complete sentence. So you have to be able to regulate for yourself the positions that you put yourself in. I think you need to say no to watching the morning news, because you will definitely be triggered. Situations that position you to have to think about yourself and the pain that you've experienced should be only done when you are in a healthy enough space. I know a real big one, and I just recently started taking Pilates, not because I want to stretch myself out so much, no, because I know that in the African American community in particular, we live in a flight or fight stance. We don't breathe deeply enough. And breathing deeply we need to do that. So the Pilates class has taught me how to breathe, right? How to actually, and I want us all to do it and feel the difference. You breathe through your nose, real deep, and exhale through your mouth. And stop and breathe whenever you're getting ready to make a decision that's heavy, or you are going to be confronted with something, because we need the energy that oxygen gives us through our body to position our brain to be in a better state to deal with it. And then if you feel like, wait a minute, this is still very challenging, I've been doing my breathing, I've been praying, because that's the one thing that has helped us survive. And it doesn't matter what faith practice. So for a lot of us, understanding mental health, understanding ourselves, we're all the experts of ourselves. So we have to know how to move in this world in a way to protect our mental well-being. And we do so by learning about it, taking inventory of ourselves every day. More people show up in hospital emergency rooms for a mental health challenge, but they may say it's my knee, my back, my arms, my headache. Little kids say I have a stomach ache when they're depressed. They don't know how to regulate enough. So regulating your emotions and building a toolkit with all the things that are important to you to make you feel good. We have to have those self-care days where we say no and we just be in a space, even if it's going out eating. A lot of us have done more of that than we should have, But walking, being in nature, you create for yourself what you know you need to have in your life to be your best self.
So one of the things that I hear you saying, that when we think about the 1800s, when we think about the 1900s, when we think about many of us being, our ancestors being brought over here, separated, all this internal trauma, the experience of seeing our loved ones beat, all the trauma that we see externally, we have often held internally. And because of holding it internally, we find ourselves going to the doctors with all these different ailments. And we find ourselves having the headaches, having the stomach aches, like you said, having the back aches, the hip aches, the surgery after surgery, and we still find out that we're still having that problem internally or externally. And I hear you say that our faith is one of the things that helps us to be able to get in touch with our true selves, right?
And if you read scripture, you recognize it's all about embracing who you are as a queen, recognizing there's a promise for your life. Even people who live with mental illness, I love working with them, because a lot of people feel like because they live with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, have some kind of stressor in their life that has caused them to retreat back in. God placed everyone here for a purpose. So I know, and Reverend Wanda shared with me, she knew she would do ministry with Oscar. She didn't know what it would look like. She thought they'd be probably standing side by side in a pulpit. But God purposed him to do even more than that. Oscar's name is in every household in the nation and globally. So his ministry is not one we would have hoped for as a loving mom, but it's also, he was brought on this earth with God having a plan for him to make and pull attention to the fact that as an African-American male, you are born with the bullseye on your back, despite what you may have done to bring joy, to bring love, to bring peace. And that white America is going to try and paint a different picture. So what bothers me and what was a trigger for me when Angela was speaking was how they will take who you know as a loving person and then try and make them out to be a brutal person for them to feel better. They'll take Oscar's phone, Angela's phone, and get to the house after they kill someone and serve search warrants to protect to the people. He wasn't worthy of living. Look, he had this in his background. He had that in his background. So that's the work that I know you're going to be doing, Reverend Wanda Johnson.
That's a challenge, because many families that I know who have lost their loved one have been challenged with their loved one maybe having a past, right? So I think about, several of the mothers here. And for example, Marion's son was just coming home, or he was having a good time, and he ended up losing his life. One son was at Walmart, going around, shopping. They thought that he had a shotgun, and then took his life, right? And so looking at how we've been stereotyped oftentimes, what can we do internally to help us when we fight the judicial system, when the judicial system is saying that your child is a thug, your child is a drug addict, your child is a past robber, your child is a past convicted felon? What can we do mentally? How do we fight that mentally? Because I know for some parents, that has been a mental challenge for them to even want to speak up about their loved one because of what society is going to say, because they may have a background. Yeah. How do we deal with that mentally?
I think it's easier if you recognize that we've all sinned and fallen short, and so don't let them weaponize your memory of your son by reminding you of the mistakes that they have made in life, especially for us who are Christian. Who was Saul in the Bible? Paul. He became who? Paul. And he did what? Persecuted? Okay, but he got past that. And so I don't worry about any of the things that put African-American young men in jail, because I know in any given neighborhood, more white crime is taking place that will never go punished than we could ever have for that. So if you're looking at your child and you know your child has made mistakes as you have yourself, then you can't be worried about the setup that they put in place for you not to advocate for your child. As a matter of fact, you could get ahead of it by saying, my child has this, he's done this, he does that. That does not stop him from not being a loving child. So for me, recognizing who your child is, referring to him in a loving manner. One of the things that also pissed me off a lot, is there already been an attack against the Black family. You didn't have the skill set, and that's why your son or daughter did what they did. No, don't let that happen. So no matter what, look at the pictures of your son, think of the memories that you had, and then think of them as, oh wow, God put you through all of that so you'd have a testimony, so that your name would be lifted up among the names of kings in our history. And you got to keep speaking their name, especially when they don't want you to.
And we still have to promote our child. We still have to champion justice for our child. We still have to, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we still have to keep talking about our children. No matter what society says, no matter when we feel like, well, I don't think it's important for us to talk about it, right? My child was not in the newspaper, so my child may be irrelevant. All of our children matter, okay? And so anyone who even thinks with the mindset of, I don't want to talk about my child because my child wasn't in the paper, we want to reverse that. We want to make sure that each of us understand when we're dealing with our mental health that your child matters. No matter what your child did, no matter what your child said, that was your child. You was gifted with that child for a purpose, and they matter, and you are to be the voice of that child. And our sisters here and our brothers who are not here, if you can't be the voice, we could be the trumpet for you. That's why it's so important for us as a community of people to galvanize together from state to state to let our society know that we're not going to accept our loved ones just being gunned down, just being put incarcerated, just not getting the mental health treatment that they need. We're not going to allow that. So some of the other things that you would recommend that we do for our mental health, can you share some?
Yeah, so through COVID, it's been a study that's shown the group of women that healed better and came out more active and vibrant was when African American women got together. When they broke away from listening to things like no physical distance. They said no social distance. They should have said no physical distancing. Because you can still be social, and it's important for us to be social. African American women are the most intelligent group of women. They have the most degrees and all of that, because we figured out, we busted the code. It's like, wait a minute, I'm losing a grip. Let me call up my sister friend. And so groups like this, bringing the women together annually like this to honor Oscar, don't you women agree that some healing takes place every time you come? Because you're with like-minded people who've experienced a loss the way you have, and you guys are all the experts of this. That's why we have, sadly, 4 people on our staff who had loved ones killed, because I can't answer that call and support them the way a Reverend Dr. Wanda Johnson or Ton Hall or Bea Quinto or Geraldine Bluford could. I can't. That's not my lived experience. So I'm able to refer them, and you guys are able to have groups. So it's knowing what your needs are and reaching out and asking for help and checking on your friends that believe. Like if you are in here and you regularly talk to someone, go and get them when you don't see or hear from them. Go get them and say, what's up? Let me support you. Because it's probably going to be around the anniversary, right? Or something triggered you with something else. So that's the most important time. And then, just be able to say, I'm not good. Being able to say I'm not good is healing. So that's the big one for me, being able to be there and support each other.
Thank you so much, Gigi. Do we have questions from the audience?
Gigi, can you kind of talk about the activism that you've done being the over NAMI and what you've done when it pertains to the politicians and
we're going to have an African American holistic wellness hub, because in every county and every jurisdiction, if African Americans are the most harmed by police, the most harmed in mental health system, we need our own money. We pay more taxes because, we don't keep it in our community as long as we could. So a lot of that tax money, when they're raising it, it's our money. So we have to make demands around how we can do it. And when it comes to police brutality, we just will always stand with the family, no matter what background they're coming from. Where police blame the individual when they're living with a mental illness, they don't say anything about the fact that the cop had their knee on the person's neck. Because of the groundwork that the Oscar Grant Foundation did, so the next step is we want to separate the sheriff from the coroner's office. It's a biased system. There's no reason in the world the person who does harm in a community would be the person who gets to decide why somebody died. We see it on video, and then he contradicts what we saw. So that's another effort to support Oscar's name, Emmett's name, all the names.
one of the things you said, how when someone loses a loved one and they start with all of the negatives about that, about your loved one, and you said you should get in front of it. Talk about your loved one in respect of the good of them. But when you said get in front, could you just expand on it?
So when I say get in front of it with all the positive. Get the teacher who loved your child to say what a great person he was.
I think it's so very important with what you said, the clarification that you got, because oftentimes when people are thrown into the media, they haven't had any training and they don't know what to say, right? And so it's important for us in this circle, and we'll have somebody who can talk to that today as well, to be able to help others be able to be in front of the media and to say or be able to articulate, the life of their loved one in a way that's not causing society to walk away and say, oh, they deserve that. Yeah. Because that's the way that our society has been set up. And so it's so important for us to have these sessions to talk about what we should and say, and what we shouldn't say, right? Or how we should say what we're going to say to help that person get comfortable or become familiar with dealing with the media or the newspaper. Understanding that we need our own newspaper and media, because you can twist and change what's being said when you're given an interview. So you have to be, very careful and really know who you're interviewing with.
Yeah, and walk in a space so what someone thinks of you ain't none of your business, right? So how more vulgar could you be than that? So we don't have to paint this picture that we're perfect in order for us to fight for justice for our loved one. That's not needed. We just, keep it moving, knowing there will be some attacks, but they are going to do that regardless. You could have been a straight A student, never had any problems. They're going to paint a negative picture regardless.
One of the things that we talk about on our session that deals with life after loss is the being able to talk to God about exactly how you feel concerning a situation. Number 2, we talk about the importance of journaling, writing out what you're feeling. The importance of getting outside and taking a walk to clear our space, what's going on inside of us. And so all of us in here are going to be faced with triggers. And the question is, when we're faced with those triggers, how do we react? Okay. Now, the stigma has set up that anyway, since the majority of us are women in here, is that we're a bunch of angry African American or Black women. So the question is, when we're faced with the internal triggers and the external triggers, how do we handle it? And so it's for us, as we're faced with the triggers, to continue to deal with that trigger in a way that we don't have to walk away from and say, wow, I wish I wouldn't have did that, right? Dealing with that trigger in a way where we're not self-medicating ourselves. Dealing with that trigger in a way where we're not hurting ourselves physically or mentally or emotionally, but dealing with the trigger, saying, I recognize you. And I always say, I recognize you, devil. Maybe I didn't pass it this time, but I'm going to pass it next time.
Amen.
So being able to recognize it and say, you know what, I'm not going to let it get the best of me today, but I'm going to fight this thing until I'm able to face it head on.
Dr. Ken Hardy said when an African American mom gives birth to a Black male child, she doesn't have a restful night after that. Not a full restful night. But he also said we have every right to feel enraged, not angry, but enraged because of the pain that we suffer as a community. So don't apologize for your true emotions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to call our next panelist up, Attorney Adante Pointer, who we are really anxious to hear from.